Hello and welcome to SOTC State of the Collection, the show where we discover watch collecting piece by piece. This is episode 2, and if you did listen to episode 1, welcome back. If you're new, hello. We sit down with watch collectors, go through their collections, and kind of work out how they got to where they are now, where they're heading, and going to go through some pieces, see how they ended up in their watch collection, and hopefully ask some questions that you might learn something, the kind of questions that maybe nobody's asking. Maybe not, we'll see. So tonight's guest is somebody that is very active in the Instagram watch space, and you may know him as PSYWAR Wristcheck and or Larry. Good evening, Larry.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, so as you know, we're going to sit down and kind of talk about the watches that you've chosen. And today's episode is called a Quartet, so we've got 4 very special watches. But before we go there, really, I kind of want to see how you got into watches. Do you remember the first watch that you had?
Yes. So my very first watch that was aside from goodness, like the Lego watches or the McDonald watches
Yeah.
growing up, the first watch that was purposely given to me was
Hmm.
a Casio for my parents for when I left and started my military career. It's an AW81, if I recall it.
Okay.
It was one of those just sports watches that, we found at the PX. My mom got it for me, and I wore that for the longest time. But then fast forward, the first nice watch that I still have to this day was a Hugo Boss that was gifted to me before I commissioned to be a lieutenant. And I treated it like a daily driver without realizing that it had essentially no water resistance and it was meant to
Okay.
be a fashion dress watch. So one bar night after another, that took a hit. Got that fixed and it's all good to go. But I guess you know, watch number 1 of my Quartet is the first watch that I purposely bought. And it's the probably what most people started their careers with, the Seiko SKX007. So I bought this in 2014.
So before we kind of dig right into the SKX007, obviously you are currently serving in the US military, if I'm
Mhm.
right. Is that something that has kind of furthered your obsession with watches, would you say?
Yeah, it has. It started out as the kind of like the link between practicality and the utility of a wristwatch
Hmm.
for work, and then more into kind of just the general obsession. And then now it's become like watch enthusiasm and how the industry has been evolving over the last several years. It's been actually my practice realm of understanding messaging, communications, and marketing, which relates to my job, which is psychological operations.
Well, that's cool because I was just about to say. So, the reason why, if you are watching this on YouTube, that you can't see Larry's face is purely for operational security reasons. Now, you kind of do work with media in your line of work, and I guess that probably links in quite nicely to watch collecting, especially in the Instagram space. And I guess maybe the two go hand in hand and some cross skills there, would you say?
Absolutely. I think a lot of you can ask a lot of cyber professionals across the combined enterprise because even like with Dan talking about from his line of work, it's
Hmm.
basically marketing and branding because you're trying to use messaging, images, sound, whatever it is to kind of shape someone's behavior into doing something. For like military applications, if it's increasing surrender or inducing a surrender for an adversary.
Hmm.
And the watch industry, it's convincing someone to spend a lot of money on a piece of technology that's archaic, right? I think that
Yep,
because of smartwatch, there's no point in owning the Casio Duro.
it's true. No, I totally agree. I mean, so my first guest on episode 1 was Jason, who is a US Navy veteran, and he said himself he's not really into kind of military watches, and I'm not, never been and not in the military, even though I do have an active interest in a lot of kind of things like planes and stuff like that. And I've got quite a few military watches, and I guess you've got some military watches and you're in the military, so it must be quite nice to have both sides of it, really. That, and I'm sure you see a lot of cool pieces at work.
Yeah, it's for a lot of the stuff that I do has been dealing with stakeholders and decision makers.
Hmm.
Despite what Instagram and social media says, right? Like being the ghosts in the machine and being all spooky, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our money is made, working with our partners, and ironically, the watch game is still kind of like an icebreaker. You'll see people
Hmm.
with rank wearing some sort of nice watch, and instead of cutting right to the chase of, "Hey, sir, ma'am, like let's talk about business," like you can say "nice watch," and if they're a watch enthusiast, now you kind of have a common ground to talk about, and it disarms them from their kind of like approach. So instead of talking to me as another army officer, now they're talking to Larry. Hey, this guy likes watches. You're a little bit more comfortable. So it has actually worked. I don't do it for that purpose. It's just nice.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I guess especially if you're in uniform, it might be the thing that kind of sets you apart as well. If you're all kind of essentially dressed the same, apart from badges and patches and things, but then everyone in the room is probably going to have a different watch on.
It's yeah, the one thing that regulation can't stop. It's very broad. It says as long as it's tasteful.
That is pretty broad. I mean, not. I would say maybe this is just my own kind of take, but I wasn't fully aware of the kind of line of work that you do and that it even really existed until kind of we got talking. And I kind of it did make me laugh that there's probably a parallel there, that I think there's also a lot of people out there that don't know about the kind of thousands of people that take pictures of their watch every day and meet up in airport hotels to look at their watch collections and stuff. So there's kind of two almost like secret societies going on, and one of them's watches and one of them's psychological operations, and you're in both.
Oh yeah, it's really really funny because they're both very niche communities. Like just because you and I are in the space, we think everyone's into watches.
Hmm.
You could probably make an argument that it's of all the cultures, I'm going to go with the US, right? So guns,
Hmm.
cars, fitness, CrossFit, they're big, they're huge communities. But then like watches is a small sub community. And then within this small sub community, there's a sub community, which is military watch enthusiasts. And if anyone ever had the capability to do an actual survey or an analysis, I would argue that at least in the US, most watch enthusiasts, people that actually pay attention to it beyond the luxury aspect, they're probably in the our professional line of work. So adventurers,
Okay.
military, law enforcement, government workers, diplomats. That's probably where you'll see the largest pocket.
That's cool. But I've never really thought about that before, but I think that from my own experience, it tends to add up. And some of the clubs that are out there, like the watch collecting clubs online and on Facebook and things, you do find a lot of people on there are military, law enforcement, especially those in the US. That's cool. So, at what point was it kind of when you had that Hugo Boss, or was it at some point after? Or what point did you go, right, I am really seriously into watches now? I've definitely got the bug.
It'll be yeah, probably when I got the SKX. So I was a platoon leader at the time, and
Mhm.
my sister platoon leader. One day he walked in with a Rolex, and I already knew Rolex
Okay.
existed. And I asked him about it. I was like, "Oh man, that's a really expensive watch." And he said, "Well, in his family, it was a family tradition that when you graduate college, you receive a nice watch, and it wasn't
Hmm.
always a Rolex. Like it could just be any nice watch." But his father, ironically, is a retired psychological operations officer. And he said, "Hey, I
Okay.
wore this over 20 years of service. I think it's more appropriate that I hand this down to you." So he handed him his Rolex, and then I asked about like the movement, and that's when I realized that mechanical watches existed. And then as we went through that conversation, and I looked at the price of Rolex online, like I was like, "Oh, that's expensive." And then he said, "Hey, man, look at Seiko. It's affordable, it's accessible, and they last a really long time." So now I bought the SKX for 100 US dollars, something like that,
Okay.
online. And then immediately, like it's like the week after, the whole Syria conflict kicked off, and then we were put on orders to deploy. So I wore
Okay.
that watch overseas and have worn it ever since. And I wasn't comfortable with spending money on watches. So for years,
Hmm.
I would just read about mechanical movements and why this ticks, why this works. And I thought it was super awesome. And that's it. I was hooked at that point.
That is cool. I mean, we've led us quite nicely into Watch One there, which is obviously the SKX 007, and it is a classic. And I was gonna, a lot of people do refer to it as the gateway drug to watch collecting, and I was going to ask you if that was your experience, but to be honest, it sounds very much so. What drew you to the SKX 007 over some other references that they were offering? I mean, obviously, it is the kind of the daddy and the one that everybody knows. Was that what kind of drew you to it, being the kind of most popular reference?
It was so my friend made the recommendation to look at Seiko, period. And then I showed him
Okay.
this. I'm like, hey, it's a dive watch. I don't even dive. And then that's when he said, hey, just like my dad's, Submariner, you can wear it
Yeah.
everywhere. It's water resistant, and he went into this. And then what ended up going with this reference, the 007 as opposed to the 010,
Hmm.
the Pepsi bezel, um, was price. When I saw it online, I was like, yeah, I was like, hey, this is $20 cheaper. I might not even want it because at that time I had a Garmin running watch.
Right.
And I'm like, hey, this is more than enough. And like, that's a lot of money. So I just went with it. And even though deep inside, I thought the Pepsi bezel looked cooler, and I might have just psyoped myself where as I wore it, I'm like, okay, it's black, it's subtle, I can wear it everywhere. I didn't even get into watch straps, so like as a gateway drug, it was just I didn't even maximize it. Like even now, when I recommend the Seiko 5 to people, I'm like, hey, you can buy these leather straps to elevate it. You can buy these straps to make it cooler or whatever. I
So many.
wore the OEM for a decade without even
Okay.
putting any thought into it.
And now it's got 100 new looks.
Yep. Mostly wear it on a NATO. I got
Okay.
one of those. I don't even know what brand this is, but I just wanted to try one of those, the stretchier parachute
Yep.
NATOs, um, just to give it a shot. And I love it. It's so comfortable. The one con though, especially if people don't have the largest wrists out there, I'm at
Hmm.
a 6.5 inches. Don't know what that
Okay.
is in metric
About 16-ish, 16 and a half centimeters, I think.
centimeters. Okay, yeah. Um, it is top heavy and it moves around.
They're a
And
thick watch, isn't it? It's quite
yeah,
a thick case, but it's still, yeah, it's a good combo, I think.
but yeah, that's the chapter one of my
That's
watch
cool.
journey was the
Is
SKX.
it modified at all? Is it all completely stock still?
It aside from the straps, everything's completely stock. I haven't even gotten the service. So 11 years later, and this has been on every deployment and every military school where we had to bring a watch. I would just take the risk and bring this. And I would always bring up a backup, kind of like a Casio or a G-Shock for the alarm clock, and I would strap that to like my assault pack or on my kit. But I've worn this in everything, and the bezel doesn't barely turns now. You kind of have to put all your
Okay.
force behind it. But I think like just the sentimental value that this has accompanied me on every mission set. Um, I just don't want to change it until I have to.
That's cool. Well, I was going to ask if you still wear it now, even though your collection is elevated, which we're going to see. But I think if you're wearing it still on every mission, then that kind of answered that question, really.
Yeah. Um,
That's cool.
well, we'll see. Like on my next future field trips, I'll always have this on me. And I always told myself
Yeah.
that like as you climb up in the military ranks, it goes from like the super cool down with the boys and girls to
Hmm.
decision making and organizational leadership. And unless I have to kit up and go out the wire, I'll be swapping with my other watches, which we'll get to. But it's this and the next watch and my next chapter that I'll talk about will be the ones on deployment when things do get serious.
That's cool. Well, that does lead us nicely into Watch 2, which is, I believe, a Breitling Aerospace. Which kind of age is that one? Because I know they've done a few different models over the years.
This is a 2005 Breitling Aerospace. The reference is E75362. So this is one of the more common ones that you'll see out there. So I've bought other watches before this, but I make this chapter two in my watch journey because this was my first luxury brand watch. This happened. I bought this watch in 2020, so after my second deployment. While I was on that deployment, I was wearing the SKX and I came across a lot of beautiful watches, Rolexes,
Hmm.
JLCs, you name it. And they're like, hey man, you should consider getting a luxury watch. And I could talk at that point, I could talk pretty in depth between movements, references, I'd recognize them on wrists from a distance, but I just never like really crossed that bridge just because
Okay.
big one was money wise, and I was just like, hey, I can appreciate it from you can appreciate a Porsche 911 without ever owning one.
It's
Um,
true.
you can appreciate a 67 Fender Stratocaster without ever owning one. But it took me a while, and I wanted to just rip that band-aid at the time and just get the Rolex.
Hmm.
But this is 2020, so that was when the craze really was at its peak. I wasn't
It was.
comfortable to this day. I'm still not comfortable with spending above MSRP on any watch. So I signed up for that list and I was like, hey, I can wait. And then 3 months later, I'm like, screw it. I'm just gonna buy a nice watch for myself. And I was really gung ho towards the whole in-house movement thing, mechanical, the artistic, whatever. And
Hmm.
then I'm like, it's back against the SKX. What if I don't like it? What if it's so fancy that I'd never wear it? So then I came across the Breitling Aerospace because of it was either Facebook or Reddit, a picture of Harrison Ford wearing one, and I thought it was cool. So I bought it. It's titanium, and I will argue it is the most useful luxury watch anyone can purchase in the military. This has accompanied me on more airborne operations and training. It has accompanied me on three field trips overseas, and I've used every function, especially like on the day to day countdown timer when I'm, funnily enough, countdown timer when I'm pulling airborne operations duties, countdown timer
Okay.
when the bottle's being warm, warm for the
Hmm.
babies, chronograph, dual time zone, like everything has been used. And I think for any digital watch, it looks
Hmm.
fantastic on any level. And then a year later, 2021, that was when Watches of Espionage, it was 20 or 2021, that was when their article first dropped about the aerospace, and then it just boomed. So it was like right place, right time.
I think you were early to the party, though, to be fair. I think maybe for me, anyway, especially since I first started following your page and, we first started talking, this is the watch I kind of associate with you for sure. And I
Yeah,
think that's probably the same with a lot of people. It's Larry's watch. Yeah, I mean, it sounds so useful that they could probably issue this thing if it wasn't for the fact that, budget cuts probably that I think every person, especially those of you that are jumping out of planes on the regular, then it's the perfect watch.
I don't know if you can see it in the camera, and I'll take a picture for you to post it up when it goes online.
Yep.
I don't know if you can see at the top three links up here. You
Yep.
see kind of like the shading.
Yep.
This watch saved my wrist from a static line hook while pulling duties.
Okay.
I had a jumper that was super nervous, and one of the rules, like for those that aren't, have never jumped out of an aircraft, you have your static line that opens the parachute. You're supposed to hand it to the safety. And I was pulling safety, and I guess this kid was just nervous and
Hmm.
threw it like
Okay.
at the last second, and like it just flung. He exited, and because of gravity, it just flew. And I just pulled my hand just back far enough, like early enough that I felt the metal just cling into my watch. I was like, oh my god, like, you know what I mean? Like
But the
kind of
watch
like
is good.
oh,
Yep.
the watch is good. Like if my watch wasn't there, it would have probably gashed me pretty bad. But now I'm never gonna get this polished because it's there. Like this watch is. I agree with that. I probably wore this watch more than any other watch. As the chapter two, I wore this watch for a year and a half straight until later on, and it was one of those watches where even my SKX, who I nicknamed War Dog, like I have to actively think about I will wear my Seiko today just because I love this piece so much.
I think chapter 4 we'll get to, but that's definitely probably encroaching on Larry's watch status now. But that's cool. So, is it the titanium model? Are they all titanium or just a couple of them? I can't remember. I don't know too much about the kind of different references, but I know they've done a few and like two-tone ones, haven't they? And some others.
Yes, in the history of the Aeroso, just kind of like the historical context, it was kind of like an offshoot of the Navitimer, and it was meant
Okay.
to go from the military pilot to the commercial pilot.
Right.
They saw the legibility, the dual screens, the functionality, the fact that you
Hmm.
spin the crown like an Apple Watch to kind of scroll through the functions, which is a really cool party trick. That's kind of what they built it, and then made it titanium either for that lightness and then the just the durability that's associated with it. And for any listeners out there that have never owned a titanium watch, a well built one, especially the aerospaces, will spoil you forever because it is so comfortable. If you don't associate weight with luxury, it's really hard to wear anything. Like it turned me off the Tudor Black Bay 36 and 54. Those were on my list to buy, and then when I tried it on, just its shape and its weight kind of turned me off from it. And it's because I was spoiled by the aerospace.
That's cool. Well, that's actually an interesting point because today I'm wearing my Seiko Shogun
Whoa.
SBDC029, and that's because we're recording on a Sunday, and I always wear it on a Sunday because it's Shogun Sunday, of course. And that is a titanium watch, and I think it's It's really nice to wear, but it's always an interesting one when you hand it to somebody, and it's a 44 mil watch, I think, and people are quite surprised that it feels so light. It doesn't have many party tricks other than a turning bezel, but that is a party trick when you give it to somebody and they say it feels almost like plastic. But as a daily wear, you get used to it and very comfortable. So I imagine the aerospace is very similar.
Yep, it is. And like, I gotta ask. I mean, is it the same thing with you? Like, once you wear titanium, it's kind of hard to go back, or does that rethink how you approach watches?
I think it's a rethink because it's a very good question, actually. So when I was looking at GSs, I tried on the steel and the titanium chrono back to back. And for that watch, the steel was the one for me because I really enjoyed the heft to it. But I think for maybe for a diver and particularly for like a daily, something that you want to throw on, the titanium works. And that's why between the Shogun and I've got a Skirfer Diver 1 MS24 as well, which is, generally my grab and go, that is because it's quartz. Then, yeah, that's also titanium. And it's really, really just kind of blends into your day, really. And you're not going to be worrying about it whacking into anything, and it doesn't feel like you're dragging it around. Whereas the steel 44 mil chrono, you definitely feel.
Oh yeah, my chapter 4 is probably the
Yeah,
same page as you.
I think so. I think it will be. What's on your wrist today?
So on my wrist today, I was wearing my aerospace. Again, back to you making that argument that, or that comment that it's Larry's watch. But for
Yep.
today's sake, I'm wearing for this episode's sake, I'm wearing the Grand Seiko SVGX361. This is
Chapter 3.
chapter 3, and this is kind of where, I don't know, like, to go from titanium to anything else was difficult, and for
Okay.
Grand Seiko to produce a watch with ergonomics in mind, as soon as I tried it on the AD, it was one of those, yeah, box it up, let's go, this is it.
Interesting. So it was love at first sight. Yep.
Yep. And it was that the comfort that came behind it, and the fact that it is, like, you could argue that this is comparable to the Datejust from Rolex, the Black Bay 36 for Tudor, and then the Aquaterra from Omega. And I was stuck between the Grand Seiko and the Aquaterra because Rolex was
Okay.
definitely not in stock at that time. And I held them side by side, and visually, people will probably like hate me for this. I thought the Grand Seiko was better executed at both the macro and the micro level. So as a visual package, it was a lot more balanced. It is definitely dressier, which is what I like.
Hmm.
And at the micro level, when you see the hand finishing down to the indice, that was like, okay, this is worth my money's. I'm saving money as opposed to Omega, and now I
Hmm.
can keep squirreling for the next watch obsession because I feel like every watch enthusiast, as soon as you buy something, you're already looking at what's next, and it's usually going up.
It's a curse. I think it's a curse, but I that's interesting. I mean, this is the SBGX, isn't it? And they represent such good value. I think. I mean, I wouldn't say that. I would never call them cheap because it's still a very strong amount of money to spend. But considering what it will compete against in terms of finishing accuracy, and even if you look at the kind of GS lineup in general, that you can come in at that level when Grand Seiko, some of their watches are, five figures easily nowadays, and you're going to get that level of finishing and accuracy. I just, yeah, I really like that kind of line and that reference in particular. Did you, were you specifically looking for a quartz, or it just kind of happened that way that this had the 9F and I imagine the Aquaterra was mechanical?
Yes, I was originally looking at a mechanical, and this is like probably like the worst chapter in any watch collector's life when everything looks like it could be the next watch. And
Okay.
for me, like, I kind of kept it to the metrics of like, okay, I want something mechanical because I already have the aerospace at Quartz. And then the more I read into the history, I was really
Hmm.
drawn into Seiko's positioning at precision, accuracy, and then just overall aesthetic utility. So,
Hmm.
I will argue, like, from a PSYOP practitioner standpoint, that Seiko is not as big and popular as it should be for two reasons. One is just the association with Japan. It's really difficult to compete against the Swiss market. You can't run around that. And then number two, their target audience remains Japan. Most of their watches are shaped and outside of their professional applications, like their dive watches and their chronographs,
Hmm.
They're made to be desk watches. Culturally, like when you're working or you're doing schoolwork, you take your wristwatch off, you put it on the table as a timer on the side, and they want to make sure that visually it is beautiful all around. And
Hmm.
then when I got into the 9F quartz, and that's when, we all know that Seiko's what kicked off the quartz revolution. They are the best at the quartz game to the point that they grow their own quartz, they age it to whatever specification it is, and then you have two watchmakers that have to assemble one quartz movement. The movement has to be serviced. The really big difference is probably the regulator and the quartz crystal. If they're the best at their game, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try that one because they're the best at the game. And number two, all spring drives were too big for me. The snowflake just didn't look good on me.
It's an unfortunate thing. I think they're going to change that up now. They've just brought out the UFA, and it's a little bit smaller. Finally, they've condensed the actual spring drive movement itself, because it's always been a limitation of the platform that it was quite a wide movement if you're looking at it from the kind of dial side. I don't know the measurements off the top of my head, but it just kind of limited. There was no way to get it into like a 36 mil case,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm aware. Would you say that if you had any kind of unjustified quartz hate towards it, do you ever have people kind of turning their nose up at quartz? Because I've found that myself, and I don't agree with it, but I know that people are very, can be quite snobby about mechanical.
So it definitely exists. And it really depends on what your personal story is with watch collecting beyond the smartwatch. Because people will
Yep.
argue, right, that it's justified if it's mechanical because there's, human touch and emotion that was placed into this or whatever narrative drives their boat.
Hmm.
But you can also say the same thing that like you can pick up a mechanical watch for less than 100 US dollars that'll outlive most expensive watches. It's very accessible technology, and then if you really want something that accurate, you go to your watch or smartwatch. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so there's that one aspect of kind of like, okay, quartz, quote unquote, is cheaper to produce. It can be mass produced, um, which makes it very difficult to justify spending more than, I don't know, let's say $200 on a watch. Whereas Grand Seiko, I think they justify it at 2000 something because everything is still hand finished, hand assembled. And then, like what you mentioned earlier, the finishing and the detailing on the SBGX is exactly the same as their Elegance collection at 8,000 and the same as their Evolution series at north of 10,000. Grand Seiko is a luxury brand, and they're not going to cannibalize their image by making some offshoot piece that blurs the line between higher consumer grade towards the luxury space.
Yeah, they've got good like their minimum standard of a watch is commendable, and there are a few brands out there, some of the Swiss brands, not Rolex, not even Tudor, but I'm thinking off the top of my head like Tag, where the difference between their entry level piece and even like their mid range in terms of finishing is quite significant. But that 9F movement, perhaps they needed to do this, but they've certainly kind of marketed it well, and everybody knows now about the accuracy and the fact that when you got the case back off, it doesn't really look like your typical kind of plastic quartz movement, and all the kind of dial side and where all the motors are is, I believe, is like encapsulated, so when you change the battery there's no kind of risk of dust getting in. And yeah, it's more than just a battery powered watch, even though we all love the Casio Duro, which to your average person, that you're going to get a similar experience of time telling, but it's that finishing that really kind of gets it over the line, isn't it, with the
Yep.
GS?
It's the finishing and then kind of like the package because, those that, the quartz movement, because it's whatever motor or whatever gear train that runs it, you can't really have heavy hands, like seconds
Hmm.
hands. The Grand
Yeah,
Seiko uses the same seconds hands because of they call it their backlash system. So if you record
yeah.
it on slow mo, it actually ticks twice that we can't see in the
Hmm.
blind eye. But that's the first tick is the movement initiating. The second tick is the backlash system, kind of like making sure that it sticks on time on the marker.
How many watches have we seen that don't hit the markers, that are considerably
Mhm.
more expensive than that? So yeah, it's a big part of their 9F story.
Yeah. And they do a pretty good job of setting the standard for luxury watches and quartz technology because Cartier, like they're stainless steel tanks that are quartz. They kind of
Hmm.
remove the second hand, and then the finishing is unbelievable where you're paying for the finishing at that point as opposed to just the movement. Like people can take a dump on the SBGX all they want, but you will not find a cheaper watch with this level of, like it. There's no way, right? Unless you're some conglomerate, like if Rolex decided to do it just for fun, like they have the
Hmm.
infrastructure. But most brands that don't carry Rolex or Seiko or Swatch Group in their name, it's really tough to produce a really well made product without a mechanical movement.
I think that we're in the golden period at the moment, and in a few years' time, the prices will have gone up to the point where they'll be more reflective of the level of finishing that you get and the level of hand finishing that goes into them. And if anybody's looking for a GS at the moment, I think now's the time, because obviously when the prices go up, it affects the used market as well. And I just think that it almost feels like a steal right now that I've seen some of those SBGXs for really reasonable price on the used market in great condition. And yeah, I just can't see it when you look again back to tag, like you can compare it to some of those kind of Formula Ones from the last couple of years, where I think retail some of them were about 1,500, and they're just not even close. You're not getting even close to the level of finishing on the case. And then the GS, you get the Zaratsu polished hands and markers on most of the models as well.
Yep. And it's one of those, yeah, Tag just would, they really set on their luxury name for their $1,500 entry level models. And I
They do.
read or heard somewhere that their position is because they aligned it with their Formula One, that when you go to a Formula One race, that is an alternative to whatever souvenir you would buy. I would assume
Okay.
Formula One is a rich people kind of
It is.
enthusiasm, and that's a really cool thing. Like, and I think that I commend them for that. But if you're looking again, both of us who are really into the watch market, beyond the tag name, sure, it's probably very well made, but it's not the quality that you would expect for 1500.
Well, funnily enough, they've now, so for, I don't know if you ever watch F1, but I'm a bit of an avid fan, and for the last however many years, I think at least the last decade, they've been sponsored by Rolex. I think before that might have been Hublot, and Tag have just taken back over again, and they've also just relaunched the Formula One line with the kind of models that reference those original models. I'm not a great big fan of those new case shapes they've come out with. They're a bit more modern looking and a bit more of a current size. But yeah, perhaps that's now going to be, again, they're going to be riding the coattails of that sponsorship. But hopefully the quality, the new ones do seem like the quality stepped up. So hopefully that will continue. With the GS, how does it fit into your rotation, and when do you find yourself wearing it?
When I first bought it, I, my motto with watches is none of my, I don't raise cowards in this house, so I'll wear them everywhere.
That's cool.
My
Yep.
first jump with this SBGX was terrifying because it's so nice. Like, what I mean, the finishing was so up there, and I'm like, oh, like no. But after that first scratch, it rotated in the collection. I still found myself putting on the Breitling for everyday applications. But now today, this probably is half of the 7 days a week, probably 3 to 4 days, depending on how I feel. I'll be wearing this watch. It's kind of like a re-honeymoon phase because for a while I was just kind of like, I'm going to save it for these nice events. I would save it
Hmm.
for dates. I would save it for days in the office where I know I'm not going, I'm just going to go from meeting to meeting. And then I wore it on a trip, and the more that like I kind of paid attention to it and noticed that holistically, even if it's got scratches, it looks fine. Even with scratches right now and paying attention to it, it's fine. It's become very, very, it's back to that, it's comfortable to wear. It's really nice to look at, especially when you're driving and it's at the steering wheel. I kind of
Hmm.
catch myself looking at it. So yeah, that's where it's at. It's probably like 50% of my um, daily wear.
That's cool. So we've now hit the culmination of your current collection. And I'm sure that it's not going to end there, but introduce us to watch number 4.
Chapter 4, my big boy piece, I like to call it.
Hmm.
If you don't mind, I'm going to keep this in kind of like narrative form. So in my watch collecting journey, I've remained faithful to the list of Rolex and waiting. While waiting on that list and after buying the SVGX, again, I saved money. I just kept piling on my little squirrel collection, just waiting for that day. While waiting, I kept researching. I started, the PSYWAR Wristcheck page and really like made a kind of like a active effort and had a more proactive effort in researching the watch industry. And at that point I was like, okay, I can keep waiting, that's great, but now there are more watches that I really like. I think Rolex is, as a brand, and its brand's history, its story, what they've produced is something that should be studied by psyop practitioners, the marketing luxury industry, the marketing industry. It's ironic that we view Rolex as a luxury watch when Hans Wilsdorf, his vision was that every person owns a Rolex. It's meant to be a tool watch, a practical tool watch with their 7 stable pieces, but it's not there anymore, right? It's because
Hmm.
of supply and demand, by definition a luxury product.
Definitely.
But something that didn't resonate. Like, the more I looked at pieces, the less I was drawn to the design of Rolex. And that's just a personal Larry's take. So that's when I was introduced and kind of had a weird obsession with owning either a Patek Calatrava, a Vacheron Traditionnel, a Longo, which is my dream watch, or a Breguet.
Okay.
Breguet was the brand that ended up sticking out. I wasn't comfortable with a vintage Vacheron, Patek, or Longa because of servicing. That's always in the back of my head. So then when I
Hmm.
looked at the Breguet, I was drawn into their classic line, 5620. And I was like, okay, this is
Okay.
going to be the next watch. I went to a Breguet AD in New York. I tried it on, nailed it. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be it. I'm going to be that one guy in the military on patrol in World War III wearing a Breguet, until basically back to, kind of like the vintage thing. It barely has any water resistance. It's beautifully made. So who knows what'll happen to it. And I can't let go of the practitioner's perspective on watch wearing. So that's chapter number 4. I came across the reference, or Breguet number 3800, the Type 20. And this, what got me to stick and just swipe that card and just bought it, is the military necessity for it. So it was, a little history lesson. Great great grandson of A.L. Breguet. He was the owner of Breguet Watchmaking, and his brother, the other Breguet, owned Breguet Aviation. The French Air Force
Okay.
in the 1950s, the French Air Force had a contract out for a chronograph watch that needed accuracy, reliability, durability, and then a flyback function. So for the chronograph, you can press the button again, and it resets the entire chronograph. So there's no stop, push, stop, push. It's instantaneous. And that's
Cool.
when the Type 20 was born. And when I read more into it, how its movement is the framework for the Speedmaster 321 or the Patek chronograph, and how much influence Breguet has had in the industry, and that's the key word, was influence. While Rolex's kind of mantra has been, the watches, people that wear a Rolex are people that change the world. So you can say General Eisenhower was gifted one, Winston Churchill was gifted one, and that's what propelled that Rolex stigma. But that's the word, is gifted. Winston Churchill chose to own a Breguet.
Okay.
Before
I
him,
didn't know that.
yep, before him. So if you watch Hour of Darkness,
Okay.
they purposely made sure that there was screen time of Churchill with his Breguet pocket watch. And then historically, so he's worn one. Before him, Napoleon was a huge fan of Breguet. And then in a little house in Mount Vernon, George Washington has a Breguet in his house. So I will argue that the people that commanded the world
I was going
owned
to
a
say you're going to
Breguet.
lead us into war with your
Yeah.
with your Type 20 on. That's
And
cool.
that's where the Type 20 came in. And it's huge. I mean, it's thick, but aesthetically at 38 millimeters, it's the perfect watch for me.
It's the flyback thing, isn't it? I think they're always a little bit thicker than you would expect when they've got that. I don't know specifically the ins and outs of what they add to the movement to have that, but it's a really cool feature. Yeah, I mean, reggae they don't get talked about that much. I think in watch collecting circles, even though all of the history comes back to that name in particular. And do you think there's a reason for that?
It's because of probably the spirit of, they try to keep it to what Breguet would have wanted. So Their watches are meant to look like a pocket watch with the lugs welded onto it, which if you can see it here, you can see that there's no clear lines between the case and the lugs.
Yeah.
They've never modernized. So Patek, Vacheron, AP, they've all, introduced a sports watch line. And even for this being a contracted tool watch, it's never moved forward with the times. And just the general public just never stuck with it. And they're going to remain kind of consistent with how they design their watches. And even their CEO has mentioned that, they asked why doesn't he have like any significant ambassadors, and that would help the brand. And he
Hmm.
argued that, like, it's never about the industry for Breguet, it's about the timepiece, the watch itself. And you can pick up any of their models and they are made at a such an exceedingly high quality within the spirit and language of how Breguet would have, designed it, which is difficult because this was what 1775 was when that brand existed. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, and it's just tough. It's tough to for them to propel.
It's probably the classiest pilot watch I've ever seen. To be fair, it's I don't know how they've managed to make something look so regal and be so suited for yeah, flying a plane. But yeah, I love it. To be fair, I think I know the answer to this, but is it something you wear every day or most days?
Yeah, this is the daily driver. It's
Cool.
definitely my most expensive watch in the collection. And then for servicing, because it is their toughest movement, it's expensive, but it's really, really reliable. It's really, really durable. Like they put the tool watch aspect into the mechanics behind this. And they kept the legibility and everything consistent with it. So yeah, it's this and the SBGX that are always fighting for wrist space. And then the aerospace is usually will sneak its time in there. If I'm traveling, the aerospace will go on, and then in the house, the aerospace is usually on my wrist.
That's cool. Were you looking for an aviation themed piece, or you were more looking to just towards that kind of step up in terms of luxury?
When I got into this chapter 4, it was between a chronograph and the asymmetric dial, because it was between the Speedmaster and the Glashütte Original Panomatic or Pano Reserve. And when I tried the Pano, it was fine. It just looked great on paper, but not on my wrist. And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
so speedy it is. And then at that point, I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid and just get the Type 20, because as a aviator's watch, it looks stunning. And I think it's the best interpretation of where I am in watch collecting and my style and what I wear. Um, and yeah, like this is more like a watch for me and less for Instagrams, because my Type 20 receives like the lowest amount of metrics when I post it online. But when people ask,
Interesting.
it's my favorite watch right now.
It's the underdog though, even though it's a tough one, isn't it? Between I think there's a reason why a lot of people have a speedy, but also that makes it like a good reason to be different, I suppose, at the same time. So that's cool. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where we've peaked with the collection at the moment. Where do you see the watch collection heading, if anywhere?
So I'm at that really happy place right now where I have my list of top 5 next watches. And right now, because I feel like whatever I purchase will not steal wrist time between the Breguet, the SBGX, the Breitling, the
Hmm.
Duro. I feel like if I buy something new, it's either going to sit there or I'm going to probably, after the honeymoon phase, just force myself into wearing something else. So I'm just going to keep pocketing my watch fund and see where it
Hmm.
goes. It's kind of a tie. It's one of those, do I just keep waiting and just enjoy the collection that I have now, and then at a milestone just rip the band-aid and get a Langa 1815? I've always wanted a gold watch. Or
Nice.
do I get a of all the Omega Seamasters, the two-tone sings to me the loudest, the black and yellow gold.
Okay.
That is up there. And then if in 20 years I finally make it on the list and I get the call, it'll be the Rolex Explorer 1. But again, it goes back to, like, if I receive that call, I have a feeling that internally I'm going to be like, okay, do I actually want this? Like, now I'm just getting competitive. I just want to get the call, and I'm at 5 years now and waiting. But I mean, we'll see, man. Like, this is like the fun part of watch collecting. I've been buying a lot of lower priced pieces just to try different aesthetics and see what I like. Like, I was always curious for the Cartier tank, and I got that Timex Noah collaboration. It's a fun watch. Definitely closes that door from a tank because now that I have this, I don't really care for the branding. I've also been looking at actually the Seiko Shogurai for fun, the black on
Okay.
black DLC. Like, I don't know
Yep.
why, but that lives rent free in my head, and that might make its way into my collection and could potentially, not replace sentimentally, but I would probably wear that more frequently than the SKX just because it looks so cool to me. Um, or something from Germany. I don't know why, but German watchmaking is super super nice.
That's cool. I mean, there's plenty of options whether you want to go down to something quite fancy or whether you end up with a Zin, which will probably fit quite nicely in with your daily operations. I would say
Hmm.
plenty of choices from Germany. What would you do differently if you could start collecting again,
I could do it all over again. I think
if anything?
I don't think I would. I might have been more patient, and if I wanted a nice piece, I usually buy something at a lower price point and try it just to see if I like it.
Hmm.
So I wore the Glassmith Original Panel Reserve, and it wasn't like a wow factor for me. And then I bought a Tissot that had a similar aesthetic, like out of impulse, just to see what it's like to live with it. And I didn't really like it. I've worn it probably, I forced it for a week, and then ever since then, I've probably worn it twice. There's a ton of
Okay.
watches in my collection that I just like. I could have not impulsively bought it. I could have just either found someone within my vast friendship and network of watch people and try it on. But yeah, I definitely would have probably cut down on the impulsive buying just for the sake of like trying something.
That's cool. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe just starting out into watch collecting or fairly early in their journey?
My advice is get what you want. Put on the blinders for what you want.
Hmm.
Ignore the noise from the journalists and the social medias and go for something that you really like. Because it really was like I was hyping this Breguet and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is it. He's gonna have this no date Submariner or something." And I brought this out and they're like, "What the what? I can't even pronounce it." And it's like, I'm sorry, man, but this is what I like. I love it.
It
Love
was
the
your
branding
card
of.
that you swiped,
Yep,
so
it's my card, it's my thing. So my advice is get what you want. If you want a Longines Zulu Spirit Time and you don't have the money, just wait until you get it. If that
Mhm.
Longines is to feed your obsession with a GMT Master 2, save that money. Just save it and just be patient. There's a ton of great watches for a lower price point, so I'll hold you over. But I know that most of the people that engage with my page and everyone that we talk as in our little group chat, as soon as
Mhm.
someone buys something as a placeholder for something else, they'll kind of like regret it. And it's like, well, now you just set yourself back 2, 3 years of saving money for the watch that you actually want. But it has to be something that you want, right? Like, don't do it for other people.
I think that's very good advice. A lot of people are buying watches for others or what they think is going to kind of elevate their engagement. And also, yeah, I mean, if you're buying that kind of middle piece to satisfy something, that can be a good idea sometimes. But if you don't pick that piece up at a good price, you're going to lose money. And yeah, you're going to set yourself back on that journey for the ultimate goal. Listen, Larry, thank you very much for coming on. Tell everybody where they can find you and keep an eye on what kind of sketchy stuff that you're doing at any one time.
So you guys can find me primarily on Instagram. So it's at PSYWAR Wristcheck, PSYWAR, and then Wristcheck. You can email me at PSYWARWristcheck@gmail.com. I do take submissions primarily of sharing your story. So just give me a sentence, a quote, something that tells me about you, and I will add it to the watch narrative. I'm not really here to post watches, but retell stories through timekeeping.
That's cool. Well, I'll put all the links in the description. And remember, you can find all of our links on SOTC.watch. Thanks very much for watching and or listening. And until next time, goodbye.
Cheers.